Welcome to my house. Welcome to the Structure Talk podcast, a production of Structure Tech Home Inspections. My name is Reuben Saltzman. I'm your host, alongside building science geek Tessa Murry. We help home inspectors up their game through education, and we help homeowners to be better stewards of their houses. We've been keeping it real on this podcast since 2019, and we are also the #1 home inspection podcast in the world, according to my mom. Welcome back to the show. It is officially winter throughout the country at the time we're recording this. The entire country is getting a little taste of Minnesota. We have shared our love with the whole country. It is cold everywhere right now.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yep. No, even like Southern Florida and like Louisiana and all these places that never have snow are seeing snow or winter weather or frost advisories. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's been happening everywhere. Tessa and I here in Minnesota, we just got done seeing like negative 28, negative 30 without the wind chill. I mean, it was cold here. When it's cold in Florida, it's probably really cold here. So that's been fun. We've got an awesome guest on, someone I've known for a long time. But you know what? Before I bring on our guest, I'm gonna give a shout out to our show sponsors, IEB. And little plug for something that they've going on. This is really geared for solo inspectors. If you are a one-person shop, they've got something coming up. This is on Tuesday, February 28th, and this is called a business mastery class for solo inspectors. And it's going from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. It's a 4-hour class. It's going to be led by the IEB CEO, Mark Hummel. Awesome dude. Love spending time with him, as well as Chris Cochran, who is one of the coaches there at IEB. And they're going to be talking about tools, strategies, and all different stuff to take your business to the next level as a solopreneur. I think that's a
solopreneur.
Word.
Okay.
Solopreneur.
It probably is. And if not, you just made a new word.
Yeah. And I've got a lot to talk about here. I'm not gonna read through all these bullet points, or it would take me forever. But I will put a link in our show notes where you can learn more about this. So there's a plug. We love IEB. We appreciate their sponsorship of the show, and we are big supporters. But okay, getting back to our special guest.
Yeah.
Yes. Getting back to our topic. We have been interviewing home inspectors all over the country. And today we've got a longtime home inspector. She has been at this for 33 years. Delighted to bring on Miki Mertz. Miki, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me on.
Woo. Welcome, Miki. We were just discussing before we started recording. You know, Miki, you've been in this industry for a long time, and you were one of the first women to become a professional home inspector, I guess, right? How have we not had you on this show?
I've been busy.
She's been busy.
So were you one of the first women in this industry, Miki, when you started going to?
Yeah, I believe I was. I became a certified ASHI member in 92, 93. And at that time, there were fewer than 10 women who were certified home inspectors. It was just, I think a lot of it's because historically, people enter home inspection as a business from the other trades. And the trades don't have a lot of women in them either. So it was just kind of a natural occurring thing. There's more women in all of the various associations as home inspectors now, but we're still kind of rare, as you know, Tessa.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I wonder what the percentage is nowadays. Reuben or Miki, do you guys know roughly kind of what percentage women? About 5? You're holding up your hand. 5%?
Yeah, I didn't know if you were raising his hand or saying 5.
Yeah, okay. I just realized that's a hand raise and the number 5. But the numbers I've heard last time I was looking into it is around 5%. Is that about what you've heard, Miki?
Yeah, I would agree, and it may even be less than that. And there really isn't any reason. A female can do the home inspection stuff just like the guys can and need the same set of credentials. You got to have the brain that can think of everything that's involved in houses. You've got to have the diagnostic skills to figure out what's going on. I guess early on, the question that people ask me a lot kind of shows what they're thinking. They said, "Ooh, do you go in crawl spaces?" I said, "Well, of course I do." And I explained to them, I said, "Men don't like crawl spaces either. They're just not socially accepted to whine about it like girls do." So if you can get over the creepy, gross, dark, yucky stuff down there, then yeah, you can be a home inspector.
Yeah, well put.
Well, and you would say that I've even heard you talk about it too, Miki, before. You'd say that there's even been some benefits to you being a woman in the industry. And what would you say that those advantages are or have been for you in your career?
A lot of people like to think that women can communicate better or explain stuff better. I don't know if that's necessarily true because, I've been to a lot of classes that Reuben's given and he explains stuff really well. But I think one of the things that I found helpful to me early on is I'm not very scary. And so when I'm with my buyers or real estate agents or the sellers, when I point a defect out or explain it to them, they usually don't get too defensive or feel threatened about it because I'm not a very scary person. And, a lot of other times if a great big 300-pound home inspector guy is doing the same thing, he might come across as more gruff, more frightening, and make the whole situation a little scarier, even without intending to, just because that's the physical nature of that particular person.
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Miki, has your appearance ever worked against you? Like, have you ever had challenges with people taking you seriously or thinking you couldn't do the job because of your size or your gender?
I had one person who, when they opened the door, they were in the house before I was. It was an 85-year-old woman. And she said, "Oh, honey, you can't possibly know as much as the men know." And I did not get offended because I had to put her in perspective of the generation she grew up in and what she understood women's role in society to be.
Right.
I said, "Tell you what, you follow me around for 5 minutes. And if you don't think I know what I'm doing, I'll go home and I won't charge you anything." So in 5 minutes, she said, "I guess you do know your stuff. You can stay."
Wow.
That's all it took me to convince her. Oh, that's fantastic.
I had to, and you just have to know what you're doing and convey that without coming across as being arrogant, of course.
Yeah.
I just like to explain stuff when I'm going through.
Yeah. I think you're you're confident. So people, hear that in you and see that in you, and it, allows them to trust you, and your stuff. You've been doing this for such a long time. I'm sure that there are people that show up and are, if they haven't heard of you in your neck of the woods, they're like, "Whoa, interesting. A woman home inspector." I'm sure you get that a lot too.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yep. And that helps business, I think.
Sure. It can. I think that the other thing you mentioned, my size, I'm not very tall. I'm not very big. I can get into some really small spaces to go inspect them. So I think that can be an advantage as well.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah, you're going in places that other home inspectors cannot get into. Small attics, tiny crawl spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another previous history thing, I know nothing about houses when I was growing up. I did not come from the trades. Closest I came was helping hold my dad's tools when he was doing projects. And my main responsibility was give it to him when he asks and close my ears for all the foul language that naturally happens when dads are working on stuff. So I didn't know that much about homes when I first became a home inspector because I was a teacher. I was a high school band director. And that's not a natural transition to being a home inspector. but being a teacher, is for me.
Yes.
Because now I say I teach people about their house, and
Yeah.
that's a very important part of what I do. As a home inspector, I have a set of responsibilities. I've got to identify what's there, obviously, but I have to convey that knowledge in such a way that the client is going to understand what in the world I'm talking about. And I think my teaching experience really helped. I try not to talk to them like they're seventh graders, but that does sometimes come in handy.
But the goal is to, write a report. We always say, I mean, you should write a report as though it were being read by a 7th or 8th grader.
Yeah.
You need to write it at that level.
Exactly.
And that is a very well-written report if someone can understand what you're talking about.
I think I found that the longer I did this, the fewer calls I was getting for, can you explain this on the phone to me? And I think what that told me is I now was maybe being better able to put it all into words in the report so that they understood it and didn't need to clarify it on the phone.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember it was probably 10 years ago now. I don't remember how long ago it was, but you came out and you taught a seminar for our local group of home inspectors on report writing.
Yeah, it was probably closer to 15 or 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness, where did the time go? Yeah, but because I had sat through your class on clear report writing, I was like, she ought to come teach here in Minnesota. So
that was fun. I was glad you asked.
Huh?
Thank you for asking me to do that. That was fun.
Oh yeah, it was, and it was a great class just on the importance of use clear language, use words that people understand, and I'm gonna butcher it. So, but there's just one example I still remember you used about explaining the importance of a combustion air intake. How did you say, here's how a home inspector might write it up, and here's how you should write it up? What was your example?
Oh yeah, I was talking about the byproducts of combustion. If you start the sentence with that, you've already lost them. Yeah. You talk about secondary combustion makeup air is necessary to avoid that's how people do it. So the way that mine is now presented in my report is furnaces need extra air in order to burn and draft properly and exhaust properly. And then here's a way to do that by putting vents through the wall or intake air or any of those kind of things. If you don't have enough air, the furnace will suffocate and start making carbon monoxide. And if you keep it simple like that, people understand and the importance of it, and you don't have to use a lot of the 4-syllable words to get your point across.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Great I appreciate you remembering that. That isn't exactly how I said it when I presented it, but yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be able to say it either, but we get the point. Use words
Plain
people
English.
Understand.
Yeah, plain English. Going back, I just want to ask you, Miki, how did you decide to get into home inspection then? If you came from a background as a teacher and for music, how the heck did you decide to become a home inspector?
Mostly by accident. I was moving to a different city, and at that time there were no band directing positions for me, so I applied for temporary jobs. A man was looking for someone to run his office, and maybe someone he could train for future home inspection. And so I started working for him and started reading everything. He just put piles of books on my desk when I wasn't answering the phone and stuff. And so, here, read this, learn about this. And then he started sending me to seminars so that I could learn more. So after a year of working for him, I'd already taken the exams that were necessary at that time. Shortly after that, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer and stopped. So I'd already gotten hooked into doing home inspections and opened up my own company. So I worked for him for a year, and it's been mine ever since.
Wow. So it just happened. It was fate. It was like you were looking for a job. This guy was hiring. You didn't know anything about home inspections, but you just went in there open-minded and you just soaked up all that knowledge like a sponge. That's amazing. Wow. And here you are 30 some years later, still doing it. And it looks like, loving it.
Can't get rid of me that easy. I'll retire eventually, but I'm still having fun.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
quit if it's something that you enjoy,
Yeah.
and you're good at?
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were, this is interesting. So, Miki, tell our listeners where you're located, and what your business name is.
Okay. My company's called Complete Home Inspection, and I'm in the Kansas City area. So I work both Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, and all of the surrounding small towns within and the outskirts of that. The greater Kansas City metropolitan area has over 2 million people.
Wow.
Lots and lots of different small towns that are all attached, in addition to the two big Kansas cities.
Okay.
And I got to say, we recently had a guest on in our regional inspection thing. We had somebody from the same area, like your neighbor, Brian Stanley.
Yeah.
Shout out to Brian.
We're having
Hi,
you
Brian.
both on. Yeah. Hey, Brian. Nice job. The reason we're having you both on is because I don't have my stuff together, and I invited both of you.
That's
really all it came down to.
It's great. We get two different perspectives. And Miki, you said you were able to kind of listen to that show in preparation for this one. So I'm curious to hear kind of your thoughts on any similarities or differences that you experience from Brian's description. My key takeaway that shocked me was that you guys don't have like any regulations for either home inspectors or for like builders, contractors, and so it just seems like it's the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah,
Is that your experience?
Got a kick out of you guys coining that phrase. On the one hand, nobody being regulated, it's just kind of old-fashioned in terms of trust and let's hope everybody did a good job and did what they're supposed to do. But in reality, we know that's going to be a problem. Neither state, Missouri or Kansas, have any regulations for home inspectors. Kansas did for a few years, and then when it came up for renewal, the governor, who was opposed to any kind of regulations, just said, no, we don't need that, go away.
Wow.
Which, that's, in a way, it's kind of sad for consumer protection. But he just said, well, Missouri doesn't have it, and we don't need it here either. Okay. So there's no home inspector regulation. In terms of building codes, they're just all across the board. There is not one unified code for the states, for the individual cities to all be together. Each state can do their own thing. Each city can do their own thing. They can adapt their own when they're going to apply which building code. And again, that's it's pluses and minuses. You never know which code applies because there's just so many to choose from, and so many different time periods. Somebody might be looking at the 18, somebody's still back in the mid 2000s. It's just,
oh my gosh.
So codes and lack thereof can be a problem. But newer construction is starting to follow a little bit more regulation in what I've seen, a little bit more consistency on how things are done. As all city code officials are not enough and overworked, things can still fall between the cracks and not get caught. And that's why when people still ask, well, should new houses be inspected? Yeah. That's one more set of eyes to find what was missed. And I heard Brian mentioning one of my favorites that happened in new construction too, that the flue pipe came through the roof and it came up through the attic floor and there was nothing in between. And it happened to me too. So we
call that
amazing.
a Bluetooth chimney.
Bluetooth chimney. I like that. New houses should still be inspected. I don't have too many new inspections that I'm doing. Most of mine are on existing homes.
Okay. Why do you think that is? Is it just because a lot of people just don't get new houses inspected because they assume it's going to be perfect?
I think that has a lot to do with it. They think that there's been the city inspectors and the building foreman inspections and all that. So I'm just not getting as many calls on new construction. Then they also feel that, well, I've got my 11-month walkthrough inspection. I sometimes get called back to do those. And then that's the real bad ones when you discover that a whole section of the attic has no insulation in it. It's like, you could have benefited from better insulation and energy rating had you had the insulation in that section for the whole past year. But yeah, most of mine are existing houses from made in 1900 all the way up to now.
Wow. Okay. What's your favorite type of house to inspect, Miki?
Oh, I kind of like the mid-century, 50s, 60s. Just because.
Why is that? Yeah.
Because those also, for me, tend to fit in a smaller package. They made a lot of post-war houses, they're not low-income houses, but they're starter homes. And so one of the joys I have about doing those is it's somebody's first house. How exciting. What a great time for them. But they're also the ones that can be hurt the most by huge financial problems that, you get a money pit of a house.
Yeah.
So I kind of like those. They're fun to do. I really get a kick out of the ones that were made in the 1920s too, because those are very interesting homes. And then
say more. Say more. Yeah. What makes them interesting? 1920s.
The house has moved around a lot. The house has had a lot of changes. People adding things to them, taking out things, upgrading, modernizing, doing things wrong. It's like, why is this room doing that? You have to be a good detective after a while to figure some of these things out of, well, how was it built and why did it do that after the fact? Is this normal? Is it going to keep doing it? So old houses take a little longer to do, and they require a lot more attention to unusual details.
Yeah.
Well said. That's the same no matter where you live, I think, as a home inspector. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're charging, do you charge more for older houses?
I don't. I should. I could. But,
you should. After this show, up your rates.
We're not shitting on you, Miki. Right. We're not shitting on you, but you should.
Okay.
You're worth more.
Okay.
In the city of Leavenworth, which is the oldest city in Kansas, I've still got some things that go back to the 1880s, 1850s. And those are also very interesting to examine. I mean, some of those houses didn't have indoor plumbing when they were built. So how did that change over the years?
Wow. And do those houses have basements, or are they crawl spaces, or are they holes in the floor? What do you see?
All kinds of things. When built, most of them were crawl spaces. So stone foundations with 2-foot or more shallow kind of a crawl space. Then they started going with basements. Some of the houses started off as a crawl space and then got dug down, and if hopefully properly reinforced, to create a tall enough basement so that they could put heating equipment in and other storage space. But those old houses either were more like cellars or crawl spaces rather than full basements.
Sure.
So we've been talking to a lot of people in certain locations, like I'm thinking Florida, for example, that the insurance companies are requiring, 4-point inspections, or they just have really strict standards for what's acceptable in order to be approved for home insurance. And they are kind of driving the market to basically update major systems in houses that, in our opinion, seeing houses that are 100 plus years old that have like original plumbing, we're like, oh, if it's a 1950s house, it's quote new, but like in places like Florida, if a system is like 20, 30 years old, it's like, good luck. At least this is my understanding of it. So they've got houses that are, 1950s, and it's like, well, the plumbing system is older, the electrical system is older, and you might have to replace the whole thing. Is that happening where you are, or are seeing houses that have, galvanized steel piping or, stuff that's, older, not that big of a deal?
What I'm seeing with the insurance industry, there's a few things creeping in that is starting to be driven by the insurance companies. The age of a roof is really becoming more of a concern. In the Kansas City area, I don't know if it's a nationwide problem or just here, we have a lot of hail damage, a lot of hailstorms, the occasional tornado, but mostly the damage that we get from storms is hail related. I think the insurance companies just took too big of a hit and had too many roofs that they needed to replace, that they're starting to crack down on. I'm not even going to write a policy if the roof is older than 15. And
okay, sure.
Yeah.
15 is like the magic number, which just kills me, because when we get an asphalt shingle roof that's rated for 30 years, here it probably could. Most of them are going to go, 25. So 15 just kind of annoys me that the insurance companies, some of them, won't write a policy on the house because it's a 15-year-old roof.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's like, okay, no, what are we doing? We're taking a roof that's at its half-life, and we're saying we got to tear the whole thing off, put it in a landfill, spend all this money.
Right.
For what? What a horrible waste.
Yeah.
Why not just charge a little bit more and say, look, we know that we're increasing our risk, so we're going to cover our butts and charge what we need to charge. But just to say we're not going to write a policy, you're forcing people to replace stuff that doesn't need to be replaced.
It's wasteful.
Yep.
Regarding the other systems in the house, knob and tube wiring is something the insurance companies have been jumping on for a long time. 60 amp service. These are things that those kind of make sense from a future fire and health safety standard. To make those upgraded. But the plumbing, haven't really seen them getting too fussy about it. They want to know about it. If it's got cast iron, if it's got galvanized, if it's got on their drains.
Sure.
But mostly they just want to know the overall condition and maybe percentage of things that have been upgraded.
Okay. Interesting. So are you doing inspections for insurance companies at all at this point, or
I'm not.
Have you been requested to do that? Okay.
No, I haven't been. I've sometimes been called by insurance companies after having done an inspection, and they just want some clarification for their records. And I get a little concerned about that, because I don't want them to start making financial decisions for my client based on my report. I'd rather have my client make those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough spot to put the home inspector in. If they're asking you more specific questions that may not be in your report, and you're telling them something, and then that ends up denying the coverage for your client, that's difficult. Wow.
Yeah, to get back to the whole code thing, I never have done an inspection that was code rated or referred to it. I think it's important for all home inspectors to be familiar with the code, so that we have a general understanding of how things are supposed to be. And if it comes right down to it, we can refer to, well, this is why it's wrong. This is how it should have been done. But there's always the time factor then of, well, when would it have been required to do this, that, or the other thing in a house? So I find myself saying to my customer, because I think the most important thing I can do for them is to educate them on what they're buying, help them understand their house, help them figure out what they're going to do about it. I find that I say the phrase, if this house was built today, it would have been, For instance,
That's a good way to put it.
An example is in our area, we used to leave garage framing open without insulating it and without sheetracking it. It was just open to the living space above, especially like a garage on the main level and bedrooms up above. It was very common to just have it open with no fire separation wall. And so at the time the house was built, that was totally acceptable and up to the codes of the time. But I want my people to know that there's a much better way to do it now that will increase the safety of the house and the energy efficiency. You don't want your garage cold air always making the rest of the house cold. You don't want the fire potential spreading. So I will say, if this house was built today, it would have consider upgrading to that.
Yeah, definitely. Would you say that you see a big discrepancy in, like, I know you're doing more existing home inspections, but if you are doing new construction inspections, because there aren't codes or enforcements of that happening, or it varies cities by city, do you like inspect some new construction that are just appallingly bad, and then others across the street will be great? Is the quality suffer?
Most of the differences I see are more subtle, but there will be differences. Like one builder is making sure that they're installing the insulation on the inside of a foundation basement, full basement, and the other builder isn't, because who's going to make it? Some builders are complying with the passive radon mitigation installations, and others are going, I don't have to do that. I'm not doing it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we can even carry that into electric things of arc fault protection. Unless it's in the specific code, it's not going to happen.
Wow. That's just kind of mind blowing, because, Minnesota is regulated. We do have, codes that are adopted, and we've got city officials that are enforcing it. And even with that, we still find things that slip through the cracks, like you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
But at least when you walk into a house that's built today, you kind of know what to expect or what it should be. So it makes those things that get missed stand out, and it makes it, easier for the client to be able to advocate, for themselves of what it should be. But I think it's even more important in places like where you are that don't have the regulation, that, you really do get a good home inspection, and you do your research, and you know the builder and the quality that they're building. And it's just, it's a different world.
I think most of what I see in the new construction is in the city propers. So they are having more consistency. Where you really see the discrepancies is when you go out into the county that's unregulated.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Then you get back to the Wild West things. The cities are enforcing the newer stuff. Out in the county, they just kind of throw their hands up of, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And we get a lot. We get a lot of that here in the Twin Cities too. I mean, when you're in the metro area, you kind of know what to expect. You drive an hour or two away, and things really start to change.
It's different. It's different. It is. Yeah. I'm curious, Miki, do you do any sort of like mold testing, or do you talk to your clients about things that are indoor air quality concerns, things like pollutants or health and safety things? As an ASHI certified home inspector, there's certain things that we're required to report on and not required to report on, and some of those are potential environmental hazards. Have you found through your years of doing this that that's something that is important for you to talk to the client about and educate them on, or do you just avoid that topic completely?
I know a lot of people treat mold like a 4-letter word. If I see a black growth on the wall, I don't hesitate to call it mold, because it probably is. And we'll talk about it, that how did this happen? And that mold is going to be formed when you have a water problem, which is something I'm supposed to be looking for anyway, whether it came in from the basement wall, whether it came in from a leaky pipe, excess humidity, any of the reasons that mold forms. I do have the capability of testing for mold. I have done it. I'm just not doing it very much anymore. I don't know why. However, when I see mold, I'm going to recommend they do something about it. And the interesting thing is, when I see mold, for whatever source it is, I say, this needs to be addressed. And they said, well, should we get a mold test? And I said, no, they're going to tell you have your mold. I am already telling you have mold. Unless you have a reason to know if it's Stachybotrys or whatever the big word for the name of the mold is. I said, it needs to be corrected. I don't care what kind it is. Just fix the mold. And I said, and more importantly, fix how it happened. Yes. Otherwise, you're going to clean up this spot on the wall, and it's going to come back because you didn't address the problem that was causing it.
You're treating the symptoms.
Right. It's like hitting yourself in the head and telling the doctor you have a headache and he gives you some aspirin for it. If you don't stop hitting yourself in the head, the problem's not going away.
Yeah.
So, mold is something that we're always going to talk about. If I see it, I'm going to address it in terms of making sure somebody does something about it. People that are highly sensitive to mold, they're the ones that usually want to test. If they have asthma or other breathing issues, they want to get it tested. And then we'll be doing a screening test so that they can get at least a baseline of what's going on. But you have to be careful to remind them that this is a snapshot in time. It doesn't mean the house never is going to have mold. Do you guys have a mold sniffing dog in your area?
Not that I know of. We could, but if we do, I have not met said dog.
We have a couple of them. The company is called Doggone Mold. Doggone Mold.
Oh my gosh.
And just like dogs can be trained to sniff drugs at the airport and any other bombs, these dogs are specially trained to, they are told to go to work, and they go through the house and they smell and they look and they look and they look. And when they sit in front of something, that means the handler should go find out what's going on there.
Wow.
And sometimes it's hidden. I saw one time when the dog responded and the handler came over and he visually couldn't see any mold. So he got down by the baseboard and the carpet and gently pried it open, and there was all this mold there the dog was smelling. And so it turned out that the window on the outside at the windowsill had been leaking behind the siding and then seeping into the subfloor area of the bedroom. But it was invisible to the rest of us. So that's
Reuben,
great.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I need to train my dog. Yeah, Sarge is the next.
We need to put him to work.
On mold. Yeah, he needs to start earning his keep. He's been freeloading.
German Shepherd. I think he could do the job potentially.
Yeah,
he has the canine makeup.
The two dogs that worked for this one company for a while were Crockett and Tubbs. Now, Tess, you're too young to know that reference.
Is that from an old TV show?
Miami Vice. The cops.
Oh my goodness! What kind of dogs are they? I'm just curious. Is there a certain breed that they use?
It is a breed specific that's real good, but I don't know what they are. It's some kind of medium-sized terrier of some sort. I don't know what his breed is.
Well, why? I mean, why not? Dogs have such a superpower when it comes to, their noses that why not employ them to help us, identify these things that can be extremely harmful to people and cause major health concerns. Because we're going in there and we're using our best judgment and what we can see and smell and observe. But there's a lot of stuff we can't see and we don't know. That's right. Sixth sense that a dog would have would really help out the home inspector and the potential buyer. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's just since we were talking about mold, I thought you might want to know about that one. But you talked about other air pollutants. We talk about the plug-in air fresheners a lot.
Okay.
They drive me crazy because I got to take them out of the wall so that I can test the receptacles, and then I've got that lovely fragrance all over my hands constantly.
Yes.
Not to mention what's in the air.
Right. Yeah. Well, and those have been proven to disrupt all sorts of things in our body. They're not good for us.
Good.
No, they're not good for us. They give me headaches too. So, yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think the air quality thing is it's a tricky subject to navigate because again, there's so many potential things that could impact the health of the occupants, and a lot of that is way beyond the scope of what a home inspector, can do or should do. But from my experience, like one of the biggest complaints from clients that I work with is just their health concerns. And so it's like, if you're a home inspector and you're going through the house and you're evaluating the systems and you're trying to make sure there aren't any big defects or health and safety issues or whatever, I feel like it's our duty to try and be educated on what these things are, and why they're a problem and what people can do about them too, so that they don't have these major, impacts later.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had one of my clients call me. They had just put in new windows, and it was the following winter, and they were starting to get sick, and that was like, what's going on? So we discussed that they used to have a house that leaked and got all kinds of fresh air, and now it was a tighter house. But
Yeah.
as I got up into the attic was just all discolored and damp. And they were saying, we don't have a roof problem. This is not a roof leak. And I said, no, it's your crawl space is leaking. I said, well, how'd the crawl space get upstairs? So we're talking about all this air movement stuff. And the putting the new windows in just magnified it, because the stuff that was in the crawl space that was constantly wet because he had a flat yard and no proper maintained gutters, had a lake in it practically all the time. It used to be able to just sort of wick up the exterior walls to about the windows and then get outside. Now it was making it all the way up into the attic. And so it was all smelling awful and black under there too.
And that's why it's so important for home inspectors to understand a house as a system. You got all these levers. You move one lever, it's going to affect other stuff.
Yeah, that is the perfect example, Miki. I've seen that too, Reuben. I'm sure you have as well. Like, we don't have a ton of crawl spaces here in Minnesota, but we do have some. And if there's no continuous vapor barrier across that floor or the ground, and even if you've got plastic, but the seams aren't taped, you can still get a ton of moisture up into the crawl space and up into the house, and then it increases the humidity in the house. And like you said, if you improve the air tightness of the walls, you're still going to have the air leaking out through the lid of the house, especially in the wintertime when it's cold outside and warm inside, and you've got this kind of natural stack effect happening. It's actually, as the air leaves out through these attic bypasses in the lid, you're actually sucking more humid, nasty crawl space air from the crawl space into the house. Your house is like a vacuum. So it's like a humidification system. Who needs a whole house humidifier if you've got a nasty crawl space that's wet, and you don't have proper drainage grading and a vapor barrier down there. So hopefully they got that fixed. But that's the perfect example of when you start to make these kind of incremental changes in houses, and you take an older house and you make it more energy efficient or make it more comfortable by adding new windows. You think that you're improving something, but if you don't look at the big picture, you are creating all these unintended consequences that can cause rot and durability issues and mold and health problems, all sorts of things.
Yes.
So you really need to think about the house as a system, like you said, Reuben.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'd say we have probably 20% of our properties have crawl spaces. It goes back to the 50s houses again. They typically have crawl space vents, typically have dirt floors, typically don't have any vapor barrier. So we talk about that a lot, of how improvements can be made in the house. That newer building science is suggesting sealing the area instead of having it vented. Because when you think about it scientifically, if it's going to be a constant cave-like temperature in the crawl space, what happens when it's 90 degrees outside and 90% humidity? Well, all that hot, humid air wants to find a more comfortable space to be, so it's going in. So those vents are not helping to air out the crawl space. They're sucking all that nonsense in.
Yeah.
So I talked to them about, what they could do in the future to make the house better. But that's where you have a kind of a gray area as a home inspector, because I'm inspecting the house as it is today, kind of letting them know what they could do in the future without making them sound like I'm the house police that says you have to do this.
Have to do it.
I tell them what they can do and why they can do it, but don't expect the seller to make any of those big changes for you.
Miki, I appreciate you and I appreciate what you're doing, because I've worked with so many clients that have had home inspections, and they have these houses that, are like you're talking about, have these crawl spaces, don't have vapor barriers, or have other things going on that aren't necessarily wrong or weren't wrong at the time, but could lead to comfort problems or durability problems. And especially if they want to upgrade it at some point, they have to do it thoughtfully and systematically. And a lot of these people that I work with, they're like, if I would have known that this was the problem, or I'd have these issues and this is what it would take to fix it and make it more comfortable or make it more healthy, I probably wouldn't have bought the house. So it is that gray area. It's tough to navigate as a home inspector. And I think that's why it's so important to try and understand building science and the house as a system, so that you can better, you're not saying it's right or wrong. What you're doing is you're educating the client on what it is and what it could be potentially.
Yeah.
Yep.
And helping them make their own educated decisions at that point.
Definitely an educated decision. I have seen a change probably since COVID. And I think a lot of it has to do with there's not a lot of houses around right now. And so there's multiple offers on the houses. A lot of times now, it's changed that when I do a home inspection, the buyer has to make a choice, take the house as is or walk away from the deal. There isn't a negotiation space anymore like they used to, because if they start negotiating, they fear that they may lose the house.
Yep.
So I think that's changed. That doesn't change what we do. We still are going to report the same stuff, but it changes the behavior of the client, because they have to really decide, well, how much money do I want to put into the house in order to make it healthier and safer and better and functional? And they're not going to be able to negotiate a lot of the big repairs like they used to, because it's being sold as is.
Yeah. Yep. We're seeing the same stuff here, I think.
Are you?
I don't know. Reuben, would you agree?
Oh yeah. I definitely think so. And I mean, when I go out looking at houses, I mean, my wife and I have looked at a lot of houses together just as investment properties. And I got to tell you, I hate almost all of them. I mean, almost every house I go to, I think there's no way I would want to buy this house. There's so much going on. I mean, like, okay, from a home inspection perspective, you could be like, the windows are going to need service. This is going to need service. But in my mind, when I'm thinking, I got to do all this, I'm like, no way. This is much. I know what it takes to do all of this. And all these old houses, I'm just going, no. And, it's at the point where my wife's just like, can you please not say no so fast? Can we just look at it together? And I'm like, I don't have to. My mind is made up. But as home inspectors, we can't do that. We can't make these decisions for people. We got to just present it in a fair light and let them make their own decisions. But so often I'm thinking to myself, if you only really, really knew, would you really be wanting to buy this? Maybe you would. Maybe I'm just picky. I don't know.
Well, you could go in and flip it like most of the flipped houses that we see.
Yeah, and just hide it all, right?
Clock it, paint it, good to go.
Yeah. I'm sure I shared a story on this podcast about a house that we looked at where it was a flipped house. And I mean, it's got all the things. It's got the granite countertops and the new kitchen and all that. Yeah. And it's all beautiful inside. I go downstairs and it's basically there's a tiny little round hole of a basement, and then the rest of the house is a crawl space. And I had and then we learned there's already an offer. It's contingent it's gonna sell. And I brush away these cobwebs, and which tells me nobody has even done this. Nobody's even been there. And the crawl space is just a mess. I mean, the foundation is caving in. The wood is just rotted away at the edges. I mean, it's just a nasty mess. And someone's going to write an offer on this. Someone's buying this.
Because
the
living space is pretty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hopefully they have a good home inspection and they have an educated home inspector who knows what they're looking at and can translate what that means for them.
Yes.
I'd say the biggest thing on flipped houses is they do make it, and I can't say that all flippers are like this, because I do have a few that are really good, but the majority of them, they make it pretty, so like you said, the countertops and the new tile and the new flooring and the new windows a lot of times, and new paint. So all of that's beautiful. And then they leave the old HVAC without even servicing it, the water heater that's ancient and already leaking, and most importantly, the problematic electric panels and all kinds of defects electrically. They didn't upgrade anything. It's still without GFIs in places that it should be. Three-way light switches are a mystery to them.
Yeah, well, it's because they could easily spend $50,000 on that, and you're not going to get a penny more for the house. That doesn't sell the house. Nobody cares. Right.
No.
So, I mean, it's easy to understand why. It's just really unfortunate.
It really is. I'd rather see them address the important health and safety and expensive stuff, the foundation, the electric, the heating, cooling, the roof. Get that stuff upgraded and normal and healthy. And then let whoever wants to buy it worry about painting it and carpeting it.
Yeah.
You guys, this is
let them do it the way they want it.
I was going to say so many, again, going back to my clients, I'm just thinking about, as you're saying this, I have so many clients that are first-time home buyers, and they either had an inspection or they didn't because of, the competitive market and during COVID, and they put in a ton of offers, got denied. And so a lot of my clients have those houses you're just describing, where since they're first-time home buyers, they're, it's a tight market. There's not a lot of inventory, and the houses are old and crappy, and they bought it because it looked kind of nice, and now they're the realization of what needs to be done and the cost of it all is hitting them, and it's like, everything that needs to be done is not the fun stuff. It's not the stuff that you get a big return on investment for. It's like structural things, HVAC stuff, plumbing, electrical. And it's kind of painful to watch, these first-time home buyers going through that realization. I wish there was something we could do about that. But again, if people decide to not get a home inspection, that's their choice.
Yeah. Yeah. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, you know what? I was just looking at the time. We should probably wrap this up, but I have one more question for you, Miki.
Okay.
I'm wondering what words of wisdom you would want to impart on your younger self if knowing what you know now, what's some advice you'd want to tell yourself when you just started this business 30 plus years ago?
Probably to remind myself to continue learning as much as possible, as fast as possible, because that first year is terrifying. You think you know everything and you really know nothing. So learn a lot and then make some plans as far as how do you want a business to run. I have never done my business the right way. I've been blessed that I've been able to coast through. I mean, even when I had employees and stuff, I don't have a business education. I don't have a huge company like Reuben does. And now I'm back to being just by myself, which is comfortable and fine as I, wind down to the end of my career.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I would do. Keep getting the education and include some education on business knowledge.
Yeah.
Good plug for that business
Good
mastery
advice.
for solo inspectors for IEB.
There you go.
To bring it full circle. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Miki, for coming on the show. Was there anything else you wanted to add or you wanted to say that we didn't cover today in the podcast?
No, I just really appreciate that you guys are doing this kind of stuff, because people need to talk about everything involved with home inspections so that you can keep helping each other and keep learning.
Well
Amen.
put.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Miki.
Yeah,
appreciate you coming on today.
We'll put a link to your info in the show notes where people can find you, Miki. And for any of our listeners, if you want to reach out to us, got any questions, thoughts, whatever, please email us at podcast@structuretech.com, and we will catch you next time. Take care.